Good day, everybody. Welcome to High Side, Low Side. I am Zach. I am joined by my friend Spurgeon. This is Season 8, Episode 11, the viewer and listener comment episode. We will spend most of this episode answering your questions that have been issued via email and YouTube over the course of this season. Also on the show, an 8-cylinder touring bike from China, and we give away a t-shirt. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Motul. And this time around, it's a friendly reminder that my favorite Motul product is the Helmet Clean. Comes in a little spray bottle. It smells as fresh as the day is long. And you support High Side, Low Side when you use it. It's really just a win-win-win-win-win-win. So, for you to win, go over to RevZilla.com/Motul. That's RevZilla.com/MOTUL to shop for Helmet Clean and all of Motul's products.
So speaking of supporting the podcast, we want to welcome our newest sponsor, Quadlock, and they're constantly up on innovation to provide the best motorcycle phone mounts for you. Actually, in the last ad, I held my phone mount up and our Quadlock rep reached out and said, your phone mount's out of date. We need to get you a newer one. And the point here is they've got new products constantly innovating, and a specific example of this is the new line of the Handlebar Mount Pro in large. This is for all of you American V twin riders out there. This is going to fit handlebar diameters of anywhere from 1.5 inches up to 2 inches. It's available in chrome. It's available in black. So if you feel like your big bar has limited you in the past as to how you can mount a motorcycle or a phone to your motorcycle, Quadlock has you covered. You can learn more about the entire line of Quadlock mounts over on quadlockcase.com. And to shop the entire collection, you can head over to RevZilla.com/quad-lock, RevZilla.com/quad-lock. And while you're over there on RevZilla.com, make sure to check out the RPM membership, where you can spend less, you can ride more with discounts on all your favorite motorcycle gear. And now it's more affordable than ever to do so. And that's because the RPM membership has a new low price for $39.99 a year. So to check out all the discounts that you get from being an RPM member, you can head over to RevZilla.com/RPM to learn more. Now, on with the show.
Alrighty, everybody, we are off on another high side, low side journey, this time around with your comments and questions. We're very excited to get into that, of course. But first, we want to cover Not the News, and it's kind of an exciting topic this time around, Spurjo. Our colleague Dustin Whelan over at Common Tread dug up this motorcycle being made by Great Wall Motors in China, and it is really something. Why don't you give the people a little rundown of specs and what this bike is?
First of all, we were just joking about the fact that it sounds like a made-up name, but Great Wall Motors is worth $28 billion, apparently. Mm-hmm. They own 5 different car manufacturers, and they're growing. And what they did this year at the Beijing International Motorcycle Exhibition is they introduced a new S1000 GL. If that sounds familiar, it should, because it's very similar to what the nomenclature is for Honda's Goldwing. And this looks like a Honda Goldwing, but with not a flat 6 engine, rather a flat 8-cylinder engine. So two more better.
And to be clear, I think it's S2000. Right?
S2000, sorry.
The S2000, S1000. I mean,
yeah.
that was
not
years
enough,
ago, presumably. I don't know.
Yeah, S2000 GL.
Right. It is an 8-cylinder touring bike with a 12-point-something-inch TFT screen and over-the-air updates and a 70-inch wheelbase, and it is
8-speed dual-clutch transmission.
All of the things. It is the lap of luxury.
So by comparison, the Honda Goldwing is an 1,833cc flat 6-cylinder with a 7-speed DCT transmission option.
And, yeah, correct. And a 66-inch wheelbase. So this thing is just bigger and bolder than a Goldwing. And for our 3-minute timer, we're going to start it right now. And I want to hear what you think about this bike, Spurgeon. What do you think about what it means for motorcycling? What do you think it indicates in global motorcycling?
Does America need a bigger
China?
Does America need a bigger Goldwing? As of right now, this isn't being sold in America. The only market in North America that Great Wall is importing into is Mexico. I think it's hard because really where I want to focus our time here is there was one particular comment in the comment section. Sometimes what I found about comment chart articles is that the comment section can be as interesting as the article. There was an individual, a regular contributor to the comment section. The hash or the username is Our Man in Bangkok, was at the Beijing motorcycle show where this was released.
Right.
And what they said was, compared to the Beijing motorcycle show 5 years ago, where it felt like motorcycles were kind of an afterthought and there was nothing new and exciting, really what they saw this year was all of the major players were there with new models for the Chinese market. The Chinese market was alive and excited with their top influencers, motorcycle taking off for the younger generation, and how this represented this new peak in performance for the Chinese manufacturing portion of the show. And I think I think that's interesting. Huge market.
Right. And I it's hard to sit here and wish for a bigger Goldwing. But it's so interesting that this thing would come to be in any market really, but especially in the Chinese market where there's obviously transportation manufacturing is a huge thing, and there's a lot of money to be made. So what I would like to say in my time here is that I'm so curious what this bike would be like to ride, because it feels like it's just like too big and too ridiculous to ever be good. It's got these big radiators that sit right in front of the rider's legs that look like they would maybe just barf hot air all over the rider. A 70-inch wheelbase is the wheelbase is almost 5 inches longer than a Goldwing, which sounds kind of insane. Like eventually bikes get so big that they're difficult to ride. It's probably heavy.
For those of you listening that don't understand what that means, it's probably going to make it difficult to turn and to handle because of how long it is.
Because of how long it is and how big and how heavy. And the technology involved that's built into it is impressive, but also that doesn't always work very well at the beginning of model lines. So basically what I'm trying to say is the Goldwing would maybe otherwise be a completely ridiculous motorcycle to try to wrap our minds around if it hadn't evolved over 40 or 50 years, right? We're all used to the Goldwing now. We know what a Goldwing is. We see them going down the road. Anyone who's ridden one can tell you that it's good. This thing kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm just curious, can you just build a bike like that and have it work right out of the gate? Can you just sort of skip the decades of evolution and engineering and make it work? Or is it going to be really difficult to ride? And if it's difficult to ride, it's going to be extremely difficult to ride because it's so big and so opulent.
So the timer has gone off, and as Zach has kind of insinuated here, we have more questions than we have answers. If you look at the Honda Goldwing, Honda's made the Goldwing smaller in the last iteration, tighter, more compact, lighter. Even Honda feels like maybe they've gone too far. And if you read through some of the comments, people say like, bigger Goldwing, not what anyone's looking for. So I think there are a lot of questions around this motorcycle. It's definitely worth taking a look if you haven't seen it on Common Tread. The title of the article is 8-Cylinder Tourer from China Takes Aim at the Honda Goldwing. There are some great comments in the comment section about the Chinese motorcycle market in general and Chinese manufacturing as it plays into motorcycling. So take a look at the article, take a look at the comment section, and let us know what you think. If you have any strong opinions, shoot us an email over to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com, and maybe you'll get your comment read on a future episode like we're about to do right now with all these other comments.
What a segue, Spurgeon, a professional podcaster that he is. We are about to dive into a dozen or so of your very own comments and questions. Without further ado, I think, Spurge, let's kick it off. Yeah, let's start with comment one. I don't think we have any other caveats or any other things we need to prime the pump or anything.
If you don't know what we're doing with this episode, you're clearly new to High Side, Low Side. You should go back and listen to previous episodes.
Right. Start a few seasons ago and come back later. So comment number one is from Lewis, Lewis, via email. Lewis says, and I quote, "Would love to know any close calls or embarrassing moments while testing all of the various bikes. Has Zach ever dropped one of the Daily Rider bikes? Ever get a little overzealous on one of those sweet wheelies? Spurge ever drop a press bike or just do a boneheaded thing?" Great question, Lewis, because we do seem like boneheads, don't we?
Yeah.
We do seem like the type of people that would make horrible mistakes or at least embarrassing.
I have a list,
mistakes.
Lewis. I don't know. Did you prepare a list, Zach? Because I don't know where to start on this one.
I don't have a particularly long list. Why don't you go first? Unless your list is about me, in which case I'm a little bit horrified.
No, you're not nearly as boneheaded. In fact, I was listening recently to a conversation with your father and yourself, which will be coming to fruition, which was the last episode that we talked about, actually, in the timeline for this. And he said that you're quite a rational rider. So I'm probably the boneheaded one here.
Wow.
Top example, Africa Twin launch for the when the Africa Twin was relaunched in America. And we had gotten up into the mountains. It was snowing. They took us the wrong way. And
sorry, set the scene here. Where you're at the launch event. You're at
Moab. We're in Moab, Utah.
Moab, Utah. Okay.
And we had gone up into the mountains, and they took us. We made a wrong turn. Our ride leader took us down a wrong way, and we were late getting to the photo stop. But the snow had begun to fall, and they weren't expecting that. And I'm not saying anything about the snow other than to paint the picture right now, because it had nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you. It was purely user error. But I was coming to a stop in front of all of the ride leaders, which had collected themselves to allow the photo stop to happen. So we all pull over, wait for the ride leader to let us go, and then we ride past the camera person and they snap our photos, is how this works. Right. And I was cocky. And I pulled up and I tried to do the thing where, like, you slow the bike down and you get yourself off while the bike is still rolling. So the bike is coming to a stop, you're standing up and you lift a leg off and you actually get off the bike while it's still in motion.
The dismount as you slow down.
You balance it and then you just hop off the bike. And I've done this 100 times without any issue. And I was coming to a stop and I got a little bit sideways and wobbly, and I fell over and the bike fell on top of me. I don't think any damage was done to the bike, but my ego and my pride was definitely bruised because they had to come over and like pull the bike off of me, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Did it look cool? Did you get a photo? And yeah, so that was probably my top example of just boneheaded things that I've done. What about you?
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I don't have anything really coming to mind. I've definitely sort of like gotten in trouble at press events, where I'm like sort of like doing something that I'm not supposed to do. Like I years ago, I went on the FJR 1300 launch. It was probably 2012 or something. I don't know. And there was a photo pass that he was saying, like what you're talking about, right? There's a photographer set up, and you blow by the photographer a few times and they take your picture. These are the photos you see when you read an article on Common Tread or other motorcycle websites. And so I did a wheelie because I thought, like, well, I've done a few passes, I'll get a wheelie picture. And then
what's wrong with that? The world loves a wheelie photo. The photographer yelled at me and he said, "Hey, don't do that. You're like making me look bad or whatever." And I didn't really understand. And then it came to my attention later that Yamaha is hosting this ride event on these same roads. And I was in the first wave of journalists that was attending this launch, but they were planning to go back with, I think, another wave 2 days later and a third wave 2 days after that to these roads. And they didn't want their reputation to be tarnished by some yabo doing wheelies and a local yokel seeing that and thinking like, oh, those pesky Yamaha people. And then when they showed up again 2 days later, be like, I'm going to call the cops now because those guys are back. And realistically, the whole team of people hosting the event were the ones that would be on the hook for that. And, that was fair. That was fair. But did they clarify that with you in advance?
They did not. No. It was only after I did it that they were upset. And, but I understand the reasoning. And so, but I mean, that's just sort of like, I got a slap on the wrist for, just being a little bit kind of irreverent. I'm trying to think of like,
maybe they just didn't expect anyone to try and wheelie an FJR 1300 and you proved them all wrong.
It's possible. Yeah, I suppose I did. I know that I often think of this story. So I'm going to share the story about Ari making a stupid mistake, not because I'm trying to,
because he's not here and he can't defend himself. Throw him under the bus.
Defend himself.
Yeah.
Well, no, the reason that I'm going to share it is that I think it's a valuable lesson. He rode home years ago on a Kawasaki ZX-10, a sport bike, 1000cc sport bike that he borrowed from another magazine, a sister magazine at the time, Sport Rider, I believe. He rode home, and he got home, and the first thing he did as he pulled into his driveway basically was try to put his foot down and catch. He caught his pant leg on the foot peg, and maybe it was an especially like sharp knurled foot peg, and so his pants really caught on it, and he just tipped over at 0 miles an hour in his driveway on this ZX10 that had that was belonged to another magazine. It was another magazine's project bike. And I've heard a similar story from someone else about doing that with a shoelace, having their shoelace catch on the foot peg, and then they couldn't put their foot down, and then they tipped over. Very embarrassing thing to happen, whether you're borrowing a motorcycle from a manufacturer or a friend, or if it's your motorcycle, it doesn't really matter. It's an embarrassing thing to do. And I only bring this up because I often think about this as I come to a stop, and I'm visualizing my pant legs and thinking how likely they already get caught on the foot peg. And I also am careful to, when I'm wearing shoes or boots that have laces, I tuck them in to the shoes so that they can't catch on the foot peg and tip me over in an embarrassing Spurgeon Dunbar-like situation.
It's true. I had a problem when I had my my KTM 1090. I had bought a pair of these. They were the top of the line TCX boots at the time for off-road riding, but they were so tall that when I was riding, I was standing up, the top of the boot would get caught under the seat, like the seat pan lip.
I've had that.
And so I would go to I'd be in an off-road section and I would go to dab and my foot would be stuck to the motorcycle.
Like wedged into the motorcycle.
Terrifying. So eventually I took a Sawzall and I just cut the top inch of the boots off. And that's how I rode with those boots from that point on. But I was we were doing, if you go back and you watch, there's a video on RevZilla where we're reviewing the BMW R1250 RS. And we were shooting the video down in Virginia, and I was doing a video pass, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I was waiting for them to tell me to turn around and come back. And I pulled over, and there was a little shoulder, and if I put my foot down on my left side, it was fine. But what I didn't realize was that it was like a steep drop off, and I went to put my foot on the right side, on the other side. Yeah,
right.
So
okay.
I went to put my foot down on the right side, and there was no ground there, and I just I fell over, and the bike fell upside down on me, and I was able to crawl out, push it back up. And if you've ever pushed a bike uphill that's down, it's not easy. But I think the adrenaline at that point was, my heart was a twitter, and I was able to get it up and turn the bike around, and I came back, and I remember I had mud on my pants, but the bike was fine. And somebody was like, "How'd you get mud in your pants?" I'm like, "We're done shooting here. I'm we've got the take. I'm out.
Cut. I'll be in my trailer.
Yeah.
Cut.
So,
all right. Well, that's probably enough embarrassing moments for now, but that is a good question. And I would just like to finish off answering Lewis's question by saying that, embarrassing things that happen to you like this it's always a learning opportunity. Anytime the smallest mistake is made, I like to try to think about it as if it were a larger mistake and try to learn what I can from that situation. So,
I think it's also important to laugh at yourself. Learn about it, but also don't ever take yourself too seriously.
And laugh at your friends, obviously.
Obviously, Ari.
Anyone else who's ridden with me is probably thinking well, Zach, why aren't you talking about the time that you
XYZ
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thing that I'm forgetting. I would be happy to share more embarrassing moments. I couldn't think of.
We could probably make it a whole podcast episode if we wanted to. It's just
maybe we should.
Yeah.
Maybe Lewis would like that. All right, moving on to comment number 2. What do we got, Spurge?
Comment number 2 is from Martin. Martin shot us an email and said, "I'm listening to your recent episode about Japanese motorcycle blunders while at work to avoid doing any work. Hopefully your boss isn't listening, Martin." Martin says, "The episode got me thinking, what would you gentlemen consider the modern UJM, the Universal Japanese Motorcycle? I grew up riding my uncle's CB350 on his farm. I have a soft spot in my heart for those early 70s Japanese standards. What, in your professional opinions," and Martin's using that term loosely, "was the death of that style of standard upright bike?" Zach, what do you think?
I really like the end of this question. Why did those go away? Because the UJM, for those not familiar, the UJM, the Universal Japanese Motorcycle, that was a pretty widely used term. I always think about 80s. He mentions 70s which is probably fair. But to me, what always comes to mind is like the what were they, like Suzuki GS 1100. There was a sort of like swath of Japanese bikes that were inline four, upright, kind of flattish handlebar, flattish seat. There were race series for them. I think those were like a lot of like early super bikes were based on those before sport bikes were really a thing. And that's what always kind of comes to mind for me. But the end of the question, Martin says, what was the death of that style of standard upright bike? And that's such an interesting question. I think before we even get to what we think the modern UJM is like, what made those go away? And I guess my what I would say, Spurge, is the sneakerization of motorcycling, right? The sneakerizing is a term for when products become very specific in one direction or another, right? Like there used to be just sneakers. And then now, of course, or as of 20, 30 years ago, who knows what, sneakers became, there's like tennis shoes and there's running shoes and there's baseball cleats and there's soccer cleats. And there's like, oh, these ones are softball and these are for rock climbing. These are like, shoes have expanded so widely into all these tiny little niches. And that's what happened with motorcycles. It's happened with many products, but motorcycles as well, right? They've become very specific. If you want to do this thing, you get this type of bike. If you want to do this thing, you do this type of bike. And I think the specificity and the breadth of bikes available is what has made those standard bikes seem like less of a pillar.
I think it's interesting. A couple things to unpack there. One, I think it's interesting that, you know, I know that you have a bit more of a sports background than I do. I know that you like to play soccer in your free time. I, as we, talked about a little bit last episode, I'm much more into music. And for me, it's always about not the sneakerization, but like the way that it used to just be rock music, but now it's like you have classic rock and you have modern rock and you have, country rock, alt rock. It's just like this all these specific little bubbles that have now popped out across all of it.
Yeah.
But back to the motorcycling piece of this, I don't disagree with you in that regard, but to me, it wasn't the 80s. To me, it was the 70s. Like I think about the CB 550s, the 750s, that classic tank engine, straight frame, straight seat,
flat seat,
But to my point, I don't think you're wrong for your 80s picks. And I guess my question to Martin is the death of the style of the standard upright bike. Did it die or did it evolve? So you're talking about the 80s bikes, which is an evolution of the 70s. Think about some of the bikes that we had in the 90s and in the 2000s. You had certain bikes that kind of carried through with this. I think about the reason I bought my Bonneville. I bought my Bonneville because it looked like a UJM. It was a tank, straight seat, engine, two wheels. There were still examples of this. You had the Ducati Scrambler, which became very popular for that reason. I'm thinking of examples from Kawasaki, from Honda, from Yamaha. Look at a modern MT-07. Is it a naked sport bike or is it just, a modern version of a UJM? And that's, I'm not arguing right or wrong, but I think that there's maybe some just evolution versus death going on.
Yeah, maybe. I appreciate what Martin's saying here, though. Like, I'm trying to think of off the top of my head of a bike from the 90s with a big engine.
But did they all have to be big engines like CB350 on his uncle's farm?
Okay, fair enough. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big engine. A full-size bike with no fairing that wasn't designed to do anything else. It wasn't designed to be a sport bike or to be a touring bike or to be a dirt bike. It was just a bike.
SV650.
No, I'm 90s, not 99, but whatever. Like I'm thinking like 1994, 92 to 96 or something like that. I don't know. Like I can't think of it. And I'm not a motorcycle historian. It's perfectly possible people be like, you're forgetting about the Suzuki, GS 1150. That was a great bike, and they made it through 96. And like maybe that's a thing. I have no idea. But those bikes weren't prevalent. They're not. If they're not popping to my mind or your mind, they were under the radar. I feel like, and I think that's what Martin's saying, and I think that's totally fair. So, but before we get too off track here, I want to pivot back to the first part of his question.
Sure.
What is the modern UJM? You brought up an MT-07 and SV650. Certainly these are Japanese motorcycles. They're standard bikes. There's no fairing. They're pretty versatile. Like you can put knobbies and a skid plate on an MT-07 and take it to Central America if you want to, or you can put, slicks on it and take it to a racetrack if you want to. And so, yeah, they do serve that purpose to some extent. And I guess to put a finer point on it, is that your answer, Spurgeon?
I think there was definitely a wane, right? I think if somebody's thinking about a UJM, they're probably not thinking about 17-inch rims, sporty handling. I think, honestly, the UJM evolved into the scrambler craze that we saw, which is probably the closest thing to a UJM that we have in modern days, is what we're seeing with some of the scramblers, the Bonnevilles. I think Triumph is probably doing UJMs better than any of the big four. I mean, Honda did try to bring back the CB 1000. Was it this? What was it? CB
1100.
1100.
Yeah.
You know, so like,
which is, cool bike.
Cowie with the W800. W900.
You know, I've got a counterpoint to all this.
Go for it.
My answer to Martin's question, what would we consider the modern UJM? I might say adventure bikes are the new UJM. The adventure category is the thing that has grown to support practically anything that you want to do. The sort of like the available performance and price ranges that you have within the quote unquote adventure category. You know, there are basically street bikes that are adventure styled, you know. There's just sort of like upright and maybe they have a whisper of adventure bike styling, but they're not for going off road. Absolutely not. They're basically just sport touring bikes. And then you have adventure bikes that are really just dirt bikes that are a little bit more comfortable on a paved road. And I just think that's the thing that supports so much of motorcycling, whether you want to go on a long road trip or whether you want to go down a dirt road. It just feels like culturally that's the sort of boom right now. And that's where that category of tall rounder, if you will, is the place that you would go to find just about any bike that you want to do any particular thing, because they're versatile and the, like I said, the available performance and versatility on tap is amazing.
I think from an ethos standpoint, I can say that as your friend and your colleague, I can agree with you. And Lance actually just wrote an article on Common Trade called the title is Motorcycle Industry Q1 Soft All Over with a Firm Adventurous Middle. And really what he's getting into is, you know, the sales of the adventure segment are still proving to be quite popular in North America.
Right.
But again, I think I would say to Martin's question, if you want to focus on ethos, yeah, I'll buy your argument on adventure bikes being the pick there. But I think as I've been thinking more and more about this recently, you know, for a lot of motorcyclists, especially ones that are just starting out, and even ones that are veterans, like looks come into it. So I guess if I had to pick like final answer, I think scramblers are probably the modern version of the UJM for me.
Okay.
So. Yeah. For a lot of the same reasons that you listed for adventure bikes. I just think from an aesthetic standpoint, that might have more of a universal kind of play there. But great question, Martin.
Yeah, I love that. I hope you liked our answer, or at least one of our answers.
Let us know if you did.
Comment number 3 came in from Jesse via email. Comment number 3 reads like this. Hey there, guys. I have been riding motorcycles since I was 10 years old. I love to go out and hit the twisties on my Yamaha MT-07, but I would rather just chill in the woods with a dual sport. But like others, I'm just too nervous to actually go camping on a motorcycle alone. I'm not the best at making friends or riding buddies. Do y'all have any advice? Spurjo?
So we could take this question in a couple different angles, Jesse. Whether it's recommending, you know, grab a Garmin inReach, and that way if something were to happen while you're out moto camping, you know, you can hit that. Mm-hmm. I would
in other words, why bother making friends when you could have a piece of electronics that will tell your loved ones?
Well, maybe you don't have any loved ones. You don't have any friends. You don't have any loved ones. You know,
maybe Jesse's a loner.
Yeah, right. Maybe you'll just go right to the emergency services and they'll come pull you out. But my point is, Jesse, I would like to believe that people want to be your friend and that you want to have friends. It might just be that it's not natural for you to go up to a bunch of strangers and say hi, and that I get it. And for that, I would say events are one of my favorite things to recommend for people to make friends. Whether you're looking at an adventure event, you know, Zach and I have talked about Get on Adventure Fest, which RevZilla sponsors. The AMA has a national adventure and dual sport riding series where you can go to the AMA's website. You can look up all the different events, find one in your neck of the woods, hit that up. I love training classes, like taking an off-road adventure course. That's where I made a lot of my friends in the beginning, was I did the Pine Barrens Adventure Camp riding course in New Jersey. I came out with a friend named Mike, and Mike and I just went out and rode together because we didn't want to go out by ourselves. The other resource is your local dealership. I've bought bikes locally here on the East Coast from Kissel Motorsports and Hermes BMW and Triumph. Both of those dealerships I mentioned because they foster a great ADV community. Kissel hosts adventure rides out in central Pennsylvania, and Hermes does it a little bit more in eastern Pennsylvania. So I think even just reaching out to your local dealer and seeing what kind of events they facilitate and using that as a way to just meet people.
That's a great answer. I like it. Everything from go on out there with the technology to keep yourself safe to, reach out and find a way forward. And I think that adventure or off-road riding events or classes is a great idea because it's a no pressure situation. You can go by yourself, but you'll be with people. And if you make friends with some of those people, great. And if you don't, fine. No one's expecting you to babysit them later or anything like that. It's just it's an opportunity to meet like-minded people. And events also. One of the things I love seeing at Get On Adventure Fest historically is people showing up by themselves and setting up a tent and then just sort of mixing it with everyone else who's there. And some people come with buddies or family or whatever, and some people just come alone to say hi. And I think you can, in those situations, really control how much or how little you socialize, Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
Again, it's a no pressure situation. The other thing I would just mention is social media. I know that in Southern California, for example, there are off-road riding groups that just sort of meet, they have like a twice a month, whatever, second and fourth Saturday morning, we're going to meet at this place and we're going to go on a little ride. And they're sort of admins and leaders who will go around and explain, how difficult the terrain is or whatever. And again, I think that's a good low pressure situation where you can show up. And if you want to, get someone's phone number and ride with them again later, cool. If you don't, then that's totally fine. So I would, as Spurgeon said, like to think that you want to have friends and be friends with people. But it is intimidating, and it's totally understandable that a lot of people's motorcycling life has been sort of a lone wolf solo thing. And if you're, it can be intimidating to like dive into the social aspect of it. But hopefully what we've mentioned here offers some guidance.
I would just like to say, Jesse, you're also not alone. I think this is something that...
No, actually, sorry. Just to clarify, Jesse is alone, very much so.
You're right.
Actually kind of said that.
But Jesse, you're not alone. You're not alone in your feelings.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay, sorry. I get it
now. Jesse, my point in saying that is that like this is still something where Zach and I were recently down in Texas, and I went out and had drinks with a colleague that I met at Get On Adventure Fest 2 years ago. We've stayed in touch. We've made friends. We keep in touch. And so like, even for myself, I'm still going out and meeting people that I like, that I enjoy, that I become friends with. So Nick, if you're listening, that's your shout out. You can tell all of your people now that you've had the shout out in the podcast, but Nick was a friend that I made through Get On Adventure Fest, and we've stayed in touch quite a bit. So it's something that, it is challenging to maintain those relationships like anything else. But I hope that those suggestions at least help to get you over that first hurdle of where to start making some of these relationships. And Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these people that show up at these events, they're like-minded people. So like you already have that hurdle out of the way. They're people that like to ride adventure bikes or dual sports in the woods. So like you're already amongst friends.
Right. Yep. And I think you'll get the vibe of the whether it's a Facebook group or an Instagram handle to follow or a dealership or whatever your avenue is that you sort of choose to go down. If you do choose to go down any of these avenues, I think you'll get the vibe, right? You'll get a sense of sort of like, does this seem like the right fit or the right attitude among the people?
There you go.
That's all you need. Just trust your instincts.
All right, Jesse, hopefully that helps you out. We are going to move along to comment number 4, which I really like. Comment number 4 aimed at 2 riders, Zach Quartz and myself, around the 6'2", 6'3" mark. Dan writes in with a question about being a little bit on the lower side. Dan says, at 5'7", I'm on the low side of average height, playing off the whole high side, low side thing. We like the humor, Dan. Dan goes on to say, I've been riding most of my life. I've done lots of rider training, practiced all the short rider tips and tricks, etc., and I'm pretty confident on almost anything. However, I still get frustrated sometimes and wish for smaller motorcycles. The problem is that physically smaller bikes are generally aimed at the beginner market with low power and cheaper components. I appreciate the need for these machines, but is there a smaller sized do-it-all daily rider with big power, top-notch brakes, suspension, and features aimed at experienced riders? Does my perfect unicorn 7/8 scale XR, I believe Dan is referring to the S1000 XR from BMW,
I believe so.
or should I throw in the towel and just buy a dun cruiser? Zach.
This is a great question. Dan is 5'7", experienced rider, wants all of the things that come with a top tier motorcycle, except for the tall seat height, but it doesn't want a cruiser. Great question, really good question. I like it. Does anything come to mind for you, Spurge?
So S1000 XR, upright, 17-inch wheels, sport,
Yep.
160 horsepower. I did a couple pieces of research here, and like one, I was trying to do like Triumph Tiger 660, which doesn't necessarily have all the high-end components that I think Dan is looking for, but with the low
Right.
seat, you can get it down to like 31, almost 31 and a half inches.
Yep.
But the real answer that I finally came to was Harley-Davidson Pan America. Harley-Davidson Pan America, 150 odd horsepower-ish. Adaptive ride height control. So you can get it with the low seat. The low seat is 30 inches. Then you go to the adaptive
That's
ride
the same
height.
height as a Honda Grom, by the way. 30-inch seat height, Honda Grom.
Okay. So then you go to the adaptive ride height control, which lowers the bike when you come to a stop. And it'll go down to, on the lowest setting, I think 28 inches. So, I mean, it might not give you the complete wow factor of an S1000 XR, but the components are top notch. The brakes are top notch. It's a great street bike. I think Harley Davidson Pan America is where I kind of settled on this, Zach. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a great answer in so much as Harley Davidson focused really hard on making that bike accessible and approachable for riders of all sizes and heights. That whole, I forget, what did you use the term? What do they call the
Adaptive ride height.
Adaptive ride height, right? Yeah. That is just very clearly aimed at people with your same question here, Dan. And so that's a good answer. I think my instinct from reading the vibe I'm getting from your question, Dan, is that you would be satisfied with a bike that was just a little bit more accommodating than it is in stock form. And that would allow you to choose from other bikes aside from Harley Davidson Pan America, though that's a good answer. And I think it's important to remember that oftentimes there are factory lowering kits. Triumph's really good about this. Ducati does it.
BMW.
BMW. Lots of manufacturers have lowering kits that you can get from the manufacturer that lower the rear suspension, just bring the bike down. It depends on how much, like a half an inch to an inch and a half, whatever. And yeah, there are also low seat options, which Spurgeon brought up as in reference to the Pan America. I think that's where I would start. I would start with the bike that you really want, and then ask if it can be lowered in a way that is recommended by the manufacturer, or otherwise, if you're willing to flirt with that, because if you take that tack, you will have a much wider swath of motorcycles to choose from, and I think you might find what you want in there somewhere.
I think that's a great point. I tried to stick with more of like looking at like the factory options. I actually went through and looked at like the S1000 XR, and with the low seat, that's like 32 and a half inches or 32 and a quarter inches in the low setting. But I like your answer. I'll leave it with this, Dan. To Zach's point, there's a way to lower bikes. There's also a right and a wrong way to do it. I like Zach's pointed effort there to say, like, go after some of the manufacturers that are providing lowered bikes where they're countering the front with the back and doing it correctly.
Last thing I'll say, we do have an article on the Common Tread website called "Should You Lower Your Motorcycle?" It was published last summer, and it's full of research and statistics about the about sort of how tall motorcycles have gotten over the years, and what lowering a motorcycle can do for you, and whether or not you should consider it.
Yeah.
So
and there were a lot of great
little bit
interviews in some of that, to kind of give it the engineer's point of view. So I'd like that recommendation. Zach, I think we've answered Dan's question. Dan, hopefully that gives you some recommendations. How about comment number 5 from Johan?
Johan writes in and says, I was recently out riding a weekend in cold Sweden. It was 5 degrees Celsius, 41 Fahrenheit. When I was crossing a bridge, my rear tire stepped out for a split second. The puzzling thing was that I was not fazed by this, as it has happened before. Note, I do not have traction control on my motorcycle. As I've only been riding for 2 years, my question is whether I should be concerned about the lack of reaction I have to the sort of luck of not crashing, or is this something normal as one gets more experience while they're riding? Spurjo?
Yeah. So when I originally read this, I actually had read it. No, I had read that they were not fazed by this, even though it hasn't happened before. But it sounds like this has happened a couple times, and he or she still wasn't fazed by this.
Right.
I mean, I think some of the advice that we try to give people around this topic, is to stay calm. And it sounds like, Johan, you're already doing that. You're staying calm. You're not. You're not doing. You're not throwing any additional inputs into the motorcycle, which could cause further instability. Right. Oftentimes, where this can lead to a crash is you start to feel that rear wheel slide out, and you try to counter correct. You try to jerk the bike upright, or maybe you put too much throttle in, or maybe you come on the brakes and
you stab the brakes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think to my just reading through your message here, it sounds like the best advice is what you're already doing, which is kind of stay calm and don't panic.
Right. So I think to answer your question, whether you should be concerned about the lack of reaction, no, you shouldn't. This is a very difficult thing to quantify, and really, you don't want to say that you should never overreact or react quickly to something that happens on a motorcycle, because sometimes you do need to react really quickly, right? Like covering the front brake is a good idea, because if someone pulls out in front of you, you can grab the brakes as quickly as possible. But in many situations, like the one you're talking about, like you're riding through an intersection, you hit a slightly slippery piece of tarmac or something like that. Oftentimes the best thing to do is to not overreact or not react too quickly, but rather, try and remain as calm as possible. So in this specific situation, Johan, I would say you did exactly the right thing, but I would warn you against complacency in these situations. Vigilance is always good. And if you're cognizant of it and think you're learning from it, which it sounds like you are, I think you're on the right path.
There you go. And that is going to take us right into comment number 6 from Brandon, who writes in and says, with all the features on motorcycles today, adaptive cruise control, engine modes, electronically adjustable suspension, on and on, why, for the love of our Lord and Savior Valentino Rossi, do more people not put garage door openers on bikes?
This is a really funny. This is a funny question. I think it's a great question. Not because everyone needs a garage door opener. And you might be listening thinking like, what? This guy wants a garage door opener built into his motorcycle? Like, what? Come on, man. Just like pound sand, like just clip it to your clutch cable or something and quit whining. And sure, you can think that if you want. But it is a good question. Of all the things, like all the crap that is built into bikes, I don't think I've ever seen...
Triumph was putting GoPro controls into their bikes for a while, where you could pair a GoPro and turn a GoPro on and off built into the Triumph dash.
So the switch gear. Yeah. I think it's a good question. And I'll bring it back around to a motorcycle that I have in-house right now that I'm testing, which is KTM's 1390 Super Duke R Evo, which has a little switch just above your right index finger as you're riding, sort of in board of the throttle on the right side of the handlebar. And it's a little toggle. It's a little kind of, back and forth switch, I guess. I'm not sure the right way to put it. It's a custom switch. So you can program that custom switch to trigger one or two or maybe more functions within the dash, because the dash is extremely complex on the 1390 Super Duke. There are so many different things that you can adjust, from suspension damping to traction control to ABS, and like it goes on and on, as Brandon said. So a little custom switch like that, a switch that you're meant to use to access whatever you'd like to access. Why not program that to, you pull it back and you get to the traction control menu. You flick it forward, it opens your garage. I don't think it's that crazy a question, Brandon.
It's funny that you mentioned this. This is going to be entirely a different topic. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that bike, only because I was reading a post recently from Solid Performance that they created a high-performance manual suspension mod that allowed riders to get rid of the electronic suspension on the 1390 Super Duke. But that's neither here nor there. But you mentioning that, remind me, let's talk about this after we're done recording this, because I'd like to hear your thoughts. Yeah. But I just want to say it out so it's on the record. This is very topical for me, Brandon, only because my wife and I are currently shopping for garage door openers. The house that we recently purchased,
exactly the right time.
Yeah,
Brandon.
the house we recently purchased, all the garage door openers were broken. So this would be great, because I don't have a garage door opener in my truck, let alone in my motorcycle. I think what Brandon's hitting on. Let's just move away from specifically garage door openers for a second, like easy passes. If you're somewhere on, I don't think
like a toll tag.
Yeah, toll tag.
Right, okay.
So something like that where, I've heard of a lot of complaints about, like, well, where do I put it? Do I personally reach into my tank bag, grab it and hold it? Sometimes it reads, sometimes it doesn't. Like, why isn't there a place that, you can integrate a toll tag on a motorcycle? So I think for Brandon's comment, on a larger scale, like some of the practicality that's missing, we're able to, link a GoPro and control that to a motorcycle. I'm able to adjust my engine braking on a high performance sport bike, but I can't open my garage door, or I can't, get a toll tag mounted in a way that works pretty well. So I think it's a great question, Brandon.
I think it could be potentially a whole nother podcast. If you have a piece of technology that you wish was integrated into a motorcycle, such as a garage door opener, I dare you to write an email to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com.
Bet you can't do it.
And tell us.
Bet you can't do it.
If you're scared, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
But for those of you with the strength to write us an email, please do that. I'm curious what other pieces of technology, because I like this question, Brandon. Anyway, moving right along to comment number 7, which comes in from, I need to scroll down. Yes, Matt.
Multiple questions
The
coming in from
eternal Matt.
Yeah.
Sent us 2 emails of a similar topic for comment number 7. And it goes something like this. Matt says, through the various Common Tread XP episodes, there's a variety of difficult challenges that Zach, Ari, and guests have faced. Cold weather, uncomfortable bikes, crazy terrain, unreliability in their motorcycles. The episode where Zach and Spurgeon rode in India, for example, included maybe the most dangerous challenge of all, fatigue. The first day lasted 28 hours in the saddle. I can't even imagine how sketchy that was. How did that compare to other challenges, and why wasn't there an option to pull over somewhere and sleep? Well, first of all, Matt, I slept on the side of the road. We saw that. The second part of Matt's question is, how do you guys balance doing dangerous things for CTXP? It seems like the most uncomfortable and dangerous episodes are the most popular. Why do you think that is, and how does that inform your future plans? 2-part question and a good one from Matt. How do you respond at least to the first part? Spurge?
So the first part, why did we not pull over somewhere to sleep? There was nowhere to pull over. I've never been in an experience like that before in my life. Like it was unlike anything I had ever done before. Zach and I pretty much had the option of like sleeping on the side of the road as we took turns doing, like in the mud, or not. Like there was nowhere to go. We were trapped on the side of a mountain. So That's the answer there. Around fatigue specifically, I think fatigue is a sneaky son of a bitch. And I think it is absolutely, I like the fact that Matt put it this way, maybe one of the most dangerous challenges of all, because fatigue comes in many forms. You could be up for 28 hours on the side of the road in India. So fatigue comes from a lack of sleep. Fatigue also comes from heat. If you're doing a track day and you're overheating, if you're out riding, off-road in the summer and you're overheating, that will wear you out and it'll hit you before you even know it. It comes from cold. It comes from pain. It comes from, if you're riding aggressive terrain and you're just beating yourself up, you've slept, you're not tired from a lack of sleep, but like, 2 or 3 hours on the side of a mountain will destroy you if you're on the wrong bike or if you're struggling.
Right.
And then there's hunger. And the hunger kind of plays into fatigue from the fact that like you're potentially burning more calories than you're bringing in. If you get out on an adventure ride and you don't have enough snacks with you, I've seen people literally, their bodies are just shutting down from fatigue because they're not putting enough calories in for what they're burning. They're not prepared for that. So I just want to say, Matt, I think you hit on fatigue from a lack of sleep, but I think it's really important for riders listening to this to know that fatigue comes in many different forms. And I think Zach and I have probably experienced all of them, I'm not at different times, or another. And it's truly scary when it grabs you.
An ounce of preparation is worth a pound of cure, I think, is what old Spurgeo's saying here. If it's hot, drink water. If you're tired, go to sleep. It is definitely something to call out, and it's a great call out by Matt in this comment, this question, and it if nothing else offers us a chance to issue a PSA, which is to try not to put yourself in a situation where fatigue is an issue. Now, let's pivot to the second part of the question, Spurge.
Can I just say one thing right before you pivot, and I'm gonna let you pivot?
Of course.
Is self-awareness. I think where fatigue oftentimes gets people is they're riding with a couple other people and they're afraid to raise their hand and admit it. They're afraid to say, hey, I'm tired. Hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I'm not doing too well back here. I need to take a break. I need help. So I think just to finalize that is,
don't be too proud.
Ride your own ride. And if you are struggling, stop before you crest the hill. That's all. Now, take it to the next section of the question.
So we'll pivot to the second part of the question, which is our flagship YouTube program on the RevZilla channel, CTXP, involves some dangerous and challenging things, as Matt said, and pointed out, rightly, I think, that it can seem like the most uncomfortable and dangerous episodes are the most popular. Why do we think that is, and how does it inform our future plans?
We should have gotten Spencer to answer this one in a video form.
I think the cleanest way to answer this is that yes, discomfort and danger are entertaining to some extent, and that does inform our future plans for CTXP episodes, in so much as we try to give ourselves challenges that are outside the norm or difficult enough that it will provide some amount of at the very least, a sense of achievement at the end of it. That's sort of like what we're after. And we do think pretty hard about it. And the working phrase that we use with CTXP planning, as Spurgeon will tell you, is the quote, right amount of adversity, the correct amount of adversity. That's what we're always after, is like the thing that will be hard and challenging and interesting, and will ask whoever's on camera to dig deep and get through it, including the crew sometimes. But never puts anyone at real risk of being maimed or dismembered or anything that's like truly life-threatening or dangerous. Aside from riding a motorcycle, which is already dangerous, let's just admit that. But we try to control the controllables as much as we can, and put ourselves in situations that are a fun amount of adversity and not a life-threatening one.
Yeah, and I think it gets back to knowing your own limitations. I think Zach, Ari, myself, sure. There's a certain amount of adrenaline that we enjoy, and I think that we're the three of us are pretty self-aware at this point as to when we've crossed that threshold, and it's now we're putting ourselves in a situation where we're out of control or we're not feeling safe. I guess my question for you, Zach, I've only been on 2 CTXP shoots so far. And I think that India was easily in my top 3 most challenging, I would say, top 3 most challenging things that I've done on a motorcycle, just from some of the hills that we've had to climb there, literally and figuratively. But for you, out of all the CTXPs that you've been involved with, and you've done them all at this point, which was the one where you felt most like throwing in the towel? Like you'd had enough. I've reached my limit. We might not finish this.
Well, we did the Dirt Roads Across Wyoming episode, I think, is the one that always comes up here. Ari and I rode vintage dual sports from the eastern side of Wyoming to the western side, and we were not allowed to touch pavement, in case you're not familiar with that episode. And we got into some situations there that were pretty bad. And ultimately we kind of did throw in the towel. I mean, we did the whole trip, but we had a situation where we were way behind schedule and we were headed over a mountain pass, and it was already, I forget, 40 degrees or something. And we knew that it was going to just get colder. We were going to go up in elevation. It was going to get colder. We were going to end up camping on the side or top of a mountain. And we didn't know if the road went through, and it was muddy and it was sketchy. And it was just, we were setting ourselves up to be in a lot of trouble. And we could see that. And we backed away from that situation. Ultimately, we just said, like, we're going to go down the road the other direction. We're going to sleep in a hotel tonight. We camped the last 2 or 3 nights or whatever. But this could break us. And it could be genuinely bad. Like, we could end up calling for help in this situation. And when we do, the authorities are going to say, what exactly were you thinking when you went up this road at sunset, knowing that it was an 8-hour journey to get across and not knowing if the gates were open or something like that? And that wasn't a question that we wanted to have to answer to the authorities or to ourselves ultimately. And so we did back away from that. That episode had 2 or 3 moments where we snapped. I mean, one moment each where we came undone personally, and we needed the other person to bring us back down to earth. And so, yeah, that's the question. That's the answer to the question. Wyoming was the hardest episode of CTXP I think we've ever done.
Well, there you go. So hopefully that helps to answer your question, Matt, as to how we, find the balance in what we do. And I will say this in closing, Matt, outside of CTXP, I think that, this is something that we, I'm not going to speak for Zach, but I think that we tend to put ourselves in situations because we enjoy it, right? I recently attended the BMW F900 GS launch, and I chose to ride that bike back as much as I could off-road, from Vegas back to Los Angeles, where I dropped the bike off for Zach to do a daily rider on it. And I got stuck pretty rough. I was in a sand wash that I couldn't get out of. I was riding solo, and I had to take all the luggage off the bike. I had stripped down to like a t-shirt. I was overheating. I had run out of water. And
covering a lot of the questions that people have had about riding alone, about fatigue.
And it was one of those ones where I'm like, if I have to hit the little Garmin button and get myself out of this, and I could see the highway in the distance, like I could see, that I could reach if I hiked across the Mojave Desert. But, I think it's one of those ones where, we sometimes put ourselves in these situations because ultimately I got out of it. And ultimately, you overcome that challenge, and it becomes a story to tell, and it's a fun anecdote. And with your riding friends or your riding buddies, or just to scare your wife, you like to tell those stories. So I think, maybe there's something to it too from an enjoyability standpoint. But I think that I appreciate your question, Matt, and I think fatigue is something that everybody out there should be aware of.
Indeed. And if you're ever invited to co-host a CTXP episode, be cautious. Comment number 8 comes in via Diego, via email. Diego has an interesting question, and we have a very special answer for this question. Diego says, I have a 2017 Honda Rebel 300. It's my first bike, and I started riding at 44 years of age. Quick pause and a round of applause for Diego. Welcome, Diego. We appreciate you. Diego says, I ride sometimes 120 miles a day between shifts, and I have my bike constantly screaming. My question is, should I switch to that Motul oil for racing applications? Would that keep my oil fresher for longer? Basically, he's revving the bejesus out of this little engine going down the road and is wondering, would a high-performance oil help his engine? Spurge, tell the ladies and gentlemen the special answer we have.
Diego, Zach and I both thought that we had an answer for you, but we didn't want to give you information based on our layman's brains. No. So we went to Ari Henning, and we had Ari Henning record an answer specifically for you. So without any further ado, let's get Ari's response to Diego's question.
I appreciate that the rider is concerned about the well-being of his little bike, because truth be told, extended high-speed riding is, in my experience, the number one killer for that engine platform. And that is primarily because it holds very little oil. It's only 1.5 quarts, so it doesn't have to get very low in order for the engine to suffer from a lack of lubrication. So the number one thing I would suggest for this rider is to just keep an eye on his oil level and make sure that it is toward the upper side of the sight glass. As far as what oil to use, racing oils are distinguished by having a lot more zinc in them, which prevents metal-to-metal contact under extreme heat and pressure. I can assure him that his engine is not suffering from either of those things. It's a fairly under-stressed motor, and even if it is spinning high, it's not producing excess heat or suffering from undue pressure internally. So a racing oil, probably not the best solution, also because racing oils tend to be more expensive and have a shorter shelf life in terms of how long they will resist acidifying and having other issues that regular street oils are made to resist. So stick with a quality name brand street oil and change it on time and make sure that it's topped up, and you should be good. I do want to ask what screaming entails for this particular bike. I know it tops out about 85, 86 miles an hour. So if you're pushing it above 75 or higher, might just be time to get a larger motorcycle, because that is a lot of hard work for such a small bike. All right, man. Good luck.
Great answer, as you'd expect from Ari Henning. Yeah, I don't know what to add to that, really. I feel like he covered all the bases.
He used a bunch of great terms like zinc and something else that he said.
Acidifying.
That was it. Yeah. No, I just like to say that I think that I'm proud of myself, because in my head, what I was thinking was Motool's race oil tends to be designed for high performance applications, but it doesn't last as long, right? You have to change it more frequently,
right.
Versus, the regular, synthetic oils that they have. So it sounds like Ari kind of gave you the same advice, Diego. And
Indeed.
Hopefully that helps. Check your oil, and you can stick with a quality regular street oil.
That's right. And on the topic of name brand high quality oils, it's time to take a quick break and get in a word from our sponsor, Motool.
All right, we are back from that shameless Motool plug. Diego, hopefully you have a good recommendation there for some oil for your motorcycle. Moving on with comment number 9 from Michael. Michael wrote in and said, I've had a lot of simple bikes in my life, but I finally worked my way up to a BMW R1100S, and I had it for about 7 years. A new business, family, plus our bit more expensive lives today has forced me to tighten my budget a lot. My question, motorcycling on a tight budget, but you have been used to a more affluent situation. What does that feel like? When you've had a nice, reliable, fancy, comfortable, fast, etc. thing, can you switch to a lesser thing? So my first question for you, Zach, as our resident BMW expert, what is the R1100S for the audience?
Wow, this is the bike that was covered in the Craigslist shopping spree one, right? This is your dream bike. You take it from here.
No. Zach's gonna cough. Mine was the newer version of this. So I had picked and found a R1200S in the Craigslist episode. This is the predecessor to that, but it's a boxer twin.
It's the same thing.
It's a boxer twin in a sport bike, very high end, very premium this day. Michael, we're going to assume that you bought it relatively new.
You're right. I shouldn't have let you describe what this bike is, because you're way overdoing it. You're like, sport bike, very nice, super collectible.
I didn't say anything about collectible. You're putting words in my mouth. My God, man. I'm just trying to paint a picture for the audience. It's a premium, sporty machine.
And we covered it in some detail in the Craigslist shopping spree episode with Patrick Garvin, which was a lot of fun between you and me. But yes, okay. So the question:
are you done choking?
Had a nice bike.
Did you swallow? Okay, you good?
I don't know. I'm not sure what happened. I like this question. You had a nice bike. You had a quote unquote more affluent motorcycling life, but now you gotta tighten your belt. You gotta have something that's not quite. So how do you go from pricey to not as pricey? I like this question a lot. I guess the first and most obvious thing is like to buy nice bikes that are used, because you can get, for the price of a brand new Yamaha Tenere 700 adventure bike, you can get a used BMW R1250 GS or R1200 GS, which is a much more affluent, nicer, but affluent's the wrong word, a much more sort of exotic, fancy feature laden machine than the Yamaha. But that comes with its own risks, right? Then you have the high price tag of repairing it and that kind of thing, Spurge. So maybe that's not the solution. I don't know. What comes to mind for you?
No, I agree with you. It's funny that you mentioned the Craigslist episode with Patrick Garvin, where one of my picks was an R1200 S. But like, I think there's a lot of great used bikes out there. And if you're looking at bikes that are, 5 or 6 years old, you can kind of save a little bit of money. We're seeing used bike prices come down. I recently got a message from a high side, low side listener on Instagram, Dan. I feel like everybody out there that buys a Honda VFR 800 sends me a message about it on Instagram. But Dan just bought a used VFR, 12,000 miles on it, needed a regulator rectifier. But like for like $3,000 ish, Dan had a pretty great, reliable motorcycle that was something that's quite enjoyable. And I would say it's not, bargain basement or cheap or budget, but like, even if you were looking brand new, there's a lot of really affordable motorcycles out there for sub
fair enough
$7,000 or $8,000.
I'd say that's fair. So let's pivot the question a little bit, though. Let's say Michael's not talking about getting a used fancy bike because that's still too expensive or not in line with what the question was, but rather you're really going from a fancier motorcycle to a less fancy motorcycle in terms of features, in terms of reliability.
So instead of
fanciness and comfort and stuff like that, we're bringing that down.
So instead of an S1000 XR, you're going to go for a Triumph Tiger 660, right? Like maybe not top end suspension, maybe not top end brakes or features, but still a fun motorcycle to ride around on. And I guess my point is that like you can get a really great fun motorcycle without having all that premium on it. Sure,
absolutely. I think you're digging sort of at what I want to address here, which is the existential question. How do you as a motorcyclist become satisfied with something that is lesser? Right? Maybe that's the question that Michael meant to ask. I'm not sure, but let's reach in that direction. What if someone said, Spurgeon, your fancy KTM is going out the door. Your beloved Bonneville, too fancy, too nice, it's going out the door. I don't think anyone would say that.
That's no.
Basically, like you gotta just like super bargain basement, whatever you can get your hands on bike. You would still be a motorcyclist, right? Even if you had to ride a 30-year-old, dual sport or something like that around, you'd still do it. Why? Why would you do it? Even though it's not as nice or not as fancy or not as reliable?
It's an interesting question that's coming at a time in our lives where I think you and I are probably thinking about this stuff, right? Like, as you know, and I talked about it a little bit on the last episode with my dad around like, he had 3 kids. He sold the motorcycle. It was time to go. He had other things that were priorities. And I think that for us, if having a KTM 890 Adventure R Rally Edition in the garage isn't in my financial future because I've got a kid or a family to support, then, I can go get a KLR 650 and have fun. I like the act of riding. I like the act of getting out on a trail and splashing through a mud puddle or throwing a saddlebag or a duffel bag over the back of a bike and, taking a weekend trip to go visit a friend or to just get out and feel the wind, in my face. Like, I think for me, the question I have for you, Michael, is motorcycling about the bike or is it about the ride? And I think for me, it's always just been about riding. It really, I like the fact that I have an 890 Rally, but that's not going to stop me from riding if I can't afford that.
Right.
What about you?
I think that's a good answer. I guess what I would say in a more, hopefully a more constructive way to answer Michael's question would be if you're switching to something that is lesser from a budget standpoint, it doesn't have to be lesser from an experience standpoint, and maybe looking around to other places to ride for less money is something to do. Like maybe, Michael, you didn't tell us this, but perhaps you, based on owning a BMW R1100S, perhaps you like taking, weekend trips to twisty roads, or you like taking an afternoon ride or Sunday ride, or you enjoy sport touring and you take a week-long trip every year. Maybe you commute to work on it. I'm not sure, but there are other avenues of riding, right? Like you could get a small dirt bike and just go out and do that. A small dirt bike would be a lot cheaper. You learn a new discipline of riding. That would be kind of fun. Maybe you commute across town on the bike and it's like feels heavy and expensive and too kind of like opulent for that type of riding. Well, get a little scooter or like a little round town bike or something like that. And that way you engage with motorcycling, but you don't do it by spending quite as much money. There are lots of other options also in that vein, but I think, yeah, that's kind of something that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I like that. I think motorcycling on a tight budget, especially when you're used to an affluent situation, like there's just a lot of ways to enjoy motorcycling. And I think to Zach's point, this is something that, I've dabbled with quite a bit with the article ideas for Common Tread. Like you can go out and take a weekend trip. I think oftentimes we have this idea of like, oh, I like to go motorcycle touring, but I don't have the money to go do it. You don't have to go out for 10 days. You don't have to go across a country. You can go out and say,
right,
I'm going to ride to a campsite or a taco stand that's a state away. I'm going to stay in a $20 campsite, and then I'm going to come back the next day. And there's so much enjoyment in trying to figure out ways to do motorcycling affordably. And I think it's a great time to be doing that. We did a video recently about best motorcycle helmets under $300. So not just the bikes, but the gear. Like there's a lot of great gear that's affordable. There's a lot of great used bikes. There's so many ways that we can answer this question. But I think Michael,
I think we've given it the old college try.
Yeah, I think that it would not stop me from riding if I had to do it on a lesser bike. And I think Zach kind of feels the same way.
Well, we hope you find your path forward there, Michael, that you find a way to ride and enjoy it for less money.
Want to move on to comment 10?
Yes, indeed. I still got this thing in my throat here, man.
Want to take a drink of water?
Yeah, perhaps I should do that.
Yeah, take a drink of water.
Just bear with me for a moment here.
Yeah, I'll keep things moving here with Alon.
There you go, yeah.
Alon wrote in, and I do hope that we're pronouncing that correctly. It's ILAN. Wrote in and said, I have a really annoying problem with my friends. We ride as four, but they never want to mesh or use their communication devices. They don't want to talk. Their opinion is that riding should be simple and hand signals are sufficient. My opinion is that hand signals are outdated. They're dangerous. By the time you make the signal and the other person perceives it, it's likely too late to be useful. What about getting gas, where you have to speed up to catch the leader, which is dangerous in its own right? In all situations, mesh and Bluetooth communication is better and safer. Is this a common opinion, or are they just living under a rock?
Good question. So, this person feels that Bluetooth communicators are the state of the art. Why aren't you using them? It's the best way to do it, and their friends don't agree. And it's a really, I love this question. Very, very good question. Spurge, what's your instinct? What does your gut tell you?
I don't know if you and I are going to agree on this one.
Ooh, interesting.
I don't necessarily feel that. I don't feel that comm systems necessarily are any safer than riding in a group where you just establish some ground rules. I think the biggest problem in riding in a group is not establishing ground rules. A 5-minute conversation before you go out. This is how much range I have. This is how much fuel I have in my tank. This is where we're stopping. I need to use the bathroom. I just had 3 cups of coffee, so I'm going to probably need to stop and pull over. Like, I think setting some ground rules with a riding group ahead of time combats 90% of the problems that I have with group rides in a way that sometimes the added complications of a comm system, I don't want people necessarily being able to talk to me all the time.
Yeah, well, I see that point of view. I think ultimately this person, Ilan, who has written in, is right that Bluetooth communicators do make communication better and safer on motorcycles. I would disagree with you there. You come around a corner, you have people behind you. You come around a corner and there's a tractor in the road, or there's something going on, and you can just say like, hey, like watch out ahead, or like, whoa, everybody slow down. That's like that amount of time that you can communicate that thing to the people that you're riding with, or person that you're riding with, is so far above and beyond the the safety bar that used to be the case, which is like you'd wave your hand or you flash your brake light or you dangle a leg out over the branch or gravel that's in the road so that they hopefully see that it's coming. Those communication techniques are valid, but not nearly as efficient, not as quick, not as clear as being able to tell someone that. So I agree with the person. To some extent, I disagree with you.
I told you we weren't going to agree.
Yeah, but part of that is that I like being on comms while I'm riding with my friends. I've always had a good experience with that. And it strikes me, well, a couple things. One, maybe your friends haven't tried it, because I did have an experience years ago where someone said, I don't want to have a communicator on my helmet. I just don't want to do it. And then we were filming a motorcycle video of some kind and they had to have a communicator on their helmet because we needed to be able to talk while we were riding. And when we did it, the person was just like floored. They were like, this is so great. I can't believe I've never tried this. It's so nice to be able to just like chat and talk. And now they're just addicted to them. Now they listen to music, they listen to the radio, they talk with their friends. And so it was just a case of dissing something before you tried it, you know? So that's one thing I'll say. The other thing I'll say is that it's possible to have a Bluetooth headset on your helmet and not talk the whole time. If you don't want to communicate the entire time, you don't have to. I know people that have Bluetooth headsets on their helmet and they will often just like, you know, tap out of the conversation and listen to music. And then when, you know, they'll tap back in 30 minutes and be like, hey, you know, are you hungry or does anyone need to stop? Like I'm getting low on fuel. We should stop coming up here. And that removes the ability to say, look out, there's a branch in the road, or everybody slow down. There's an emergency ahead or something like that. But it does increase the ability to communicate and does not provide any obligation that you have to make small talk the whole time.
I think all I would say is that I think that there's two sides to every story. I can see the argument that you're presenting for both. And frankly, like if I'm on the street, I typically have a communicator on my helmet. It depends on who I'm riding with as to whether or not I'm linked up with them or not. Yep. I have had the flip side of that where, you know, you're going through a corner and the person leading the group ride sees the branch in the road and they almost make the situation worse by like screaming and startling and unsettling the riders that come behind it. So I think, again, it gets back to my point of like having a conversation about things ahead of time. Like, this is what I'm going to say. If I'm going around a corner and I'm noticing a branch in the road, I am going to notify, or I'm going to say something like, hey, watch out. Because there's been those ride leaders where I've been on group rides where they're like, oh my God, stop it. And you go around the corner, you're like, man, like I would have been fine just going around that versus like you freaking somebody out and they went wide and slammed on the brakes and then that caused everybody else to pile up and almost had an accident. So I guess just to play devil's advocate, I think that there's a downside to that too, depending on how people are using or abusing the technology.
Your friends are idiots, Elon, is what Spurgeon's saying here. And I apologize on behalf of High Side, Low Side. I'm so sorry.
I'm defending their friends for wanting to use hand signals.
Yeah, it's true. So I guess to summarize, I think that there's no doubt that it is better and safer to communicate that way. But Spurgeon's caveat about having talk with the people you're riding with before you go out about expectations for communication, also crucial.
All right. Well, we clearly answered that one.
Very
depending on who you want to listen to, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there listening that have their own opinions on this, and I'm sure that we'll hear about them in the comments below or in the emails that you're sending us to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. Moving on to comment 11.
Comment 11 comes in from Tyler, who says, as a kid in the 90s, my first exposure to motorcycles, apart from seeing them on the road, was arcades and video games like Road Rash. Fond memories, white and color splash, fully fared twin round headlight sport bikes from that time, and thinking how cool they were upon seeing them parked at the malls. My question is, why aren't we seeing, or could we see, 90s styled sport bikes? Crazy graphics, round lights, big plastics, fairing braces, asymmetrical analog gauges, big chrome pipes, etc., but with all the magic of fuel injection and anti-lock brakes. with Kawasaki coming out with 40th anniversary paint schemes and Yamaha doing something similar, I'm really hoping it could be a thing we see in the future. Spurgeon, what do you say to Tyler?
Podcast episode, motorcycles and video games. I'm going to throw it out there. I don't even play a lot of video games, but like Road Rash, there was something about that game. For those of you that don't know, Road Rash was a game for Sega Genesis. There was Road Rash 2, where you were on a sport bike and you're basically racing, but they gave you like you could get like a chain or a bat.
You also could like fight. You could like hit
people and kick them.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great showing for like how motorcycling actually worked, but it was pretty engaging as a teenager. Then there's like Excite Bike and like it just keeps going. So I think maybe motorcycles and video games, entirely other podcast idea. That was really my main thought here. Other than the fact that like we've Tyler, I think we've done a couple articles on Common Tread. Most recently, Dustin Whelan wrote one about trends to watch, which was dirt bikes going retro in 90s graphics. We're seeing that trend. Andy Greaser, a longtime contributor and associate editor for Common Tread, wrote an article about retro motorcycle fairings and like how they're making a modern kind of comeback. And even yourself have listed out some examples here. So I think, Zach, it sounds like there might be a trend, and it sounds like Tyler is just acknowledging that. I
think Tyler is in for a treat the next few years. I think we're just going to see more of this. There's going to be more anniversary editions, and you know, as we move further away, from the 80s and 90s, the more likely those eras are to be cool. Frankly, I think that we're gonna see that. I think the 40th anniversary paint schemes on those Kawasaki sport bikes are dynamite, and I just hope that more manufacturers keep doing it because there's no reason not to, as far as I can tell.
And we talked about it
a ton of effort.
We talked about it earlier. I think it was earlier this season with the season opener with Lance around the fact that Yamaha has the XSR 900 GP, a bike that they have yet to announce that they're bringing to America, and it's one that we're all sitting there being like, this bike looks awesome. It looks like something straight out of the 90s. It looks cool, you know?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I think that in some ways you answered your own question, Tyler, but we did want to call it out as a trend, and we wanted to point you in the direction of those Common Tread articles because we have addressed it on one of our many media platforms, and hopefully that helps you be inspired and excited.
So moving right along to J Pass, who wrote in for comment number 12. And J Pass writes and says, "Greetings from Canada. A round
Wherever that is.
A round of topics that are arguably a whole other podcast." And then J Pass goes on to give us a bunch of podcast ideas. So first one, buying the wrong motorcycle for the right reasons, i.e. deliberately trying something different, self-restraint, buying for a certain feature, taking a risk, etc. Number 2, motorcycles that non-motorcyclists like. Number 3, my firm belief that if Honda made a modern electric maxi scooter that out-Bergman the Suzuki Bergman, there would be a renaissance that would make the Super Cub look like their warm-up lap, but I still wouldn't buy one. All ideas from J-Pass. Zach, what do you think?
I think it speaks volumes that we have chosen this comment to read in the comment episode and not taken these ideas and turn them into podcasts. Sorry, J-Pass. We are going to J-Pass, you might say, on your ideas for podcasts, but it's a fun little batch of questions here. Let's take it from the top, shall we? Buying the, quote, wrong motorcycle for the, quote, right reasons. This is an interesting little slice of conversation. The first thing I would say is that we talked to Peter Egan about this, all right? Peter Egan, legend of motorcycle journalism, on the podcast earlier this season, and it basically admitted to this, right? It was like, I got that bike because I wanted to try it. I don't know, I just wanted to try it, and then I got rid of it, and then I got something else. And the man's had 80-something motorcycles, and they're buying the wrong motorcycle for the right reasons is the right motorcycle. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think we could make it a podcast episode, but I think Zach just summed it up in a pretty succinct way. Looking at number 2, motorcycles that non-motorcyclists like. This is the one out of the 3 that you wrote in. I feel like this could be a podcast episode. There's a lot to unpack
how
here.
How do we know what they are? Because we're motorcyclists, so we're not going to be able to figure out.
For those of you listening to the podcast, not watching, Zach's doing an eye trick that he managed to hurt himself while doing. He's
Oh, it was J-Pass hurt my eyes, hurt my brain with that question. How does a motorcyclist decide what motorcyclist a non-motorcyclist like? How much wood could a woodchuck chuck?
Could a woodchuck chuck wood?
I think if a woodchuck could chuck wood, a woodchuck
It would be a
could
beaver.
chuck a lot of wood.
It would be a beaver. Yeah.
The point is, this is a difficult thing to read. It's a fun idea, but I think what you're seeing in the motorcycling world, the motorcycling lexicon, whatever, are motorcycles that non-motorcyclists like to some extent. Honda is most famous for this, I think, but certain motorcycles are clearly designed for people who like motorcycles, people who are already motorcyclists, right? This is what most of the industry exists for, to serve people that motorcycle manufacturers are already curious or already convinced, will be purchased by people in general. But experiments do take place, right? Most brands of motorcycle have entry-level motorcycles, and what they're doing is trying to create a motorcycle that a non-motorcyclist likes, right? They're trying to build a machine that attracts someone who has not gotten their motorcycle license, who does not already ride. So I think that the question answers itself in so much as the bikes exist already. I think, like if you look at a Honda Super Cub, sure, there's a play there for nostalgia, for people who remember the original Super Cub and who think, oh, I should get one of those and have it in my garage or put it on the back of my RV for when I go to Tucson later this year or whatever it is. But there's also a whiff of like trying to attract
non-motorcyclists. Yeah.
Right.
I think this becomes a question too of a lot of the electric bicycle thing that's going on right now. I know that we've talked about this in passing, but like you go, your neck of the woods out there in sunny Southern California. I was out recently, and there's a little hotel that I stay at in the Manhattan Beach area. And dude, it's like everybody and their cousins and sisters and aunts and brothers are riding around on all these different variations of e-bikes. And I think, when you're thinking about something that's a motorcyclist or a motorcycle that non-motorcyclists like, I think we're seeing this weird renaissance in bicycling right now, but it's not pedal power. It's these little electric powered machines that are really approachable. And I think whether or not people transition from that into motorcycling has yet to be determined, but it's exciting. Yeah. It's exciting to see a bunch of 12-year-olds that are ripping around on these little things and having a good time.
Yeah. I've seen a number of teenagers in Southern California doing wheelies on electric bicycles that would have been just impossible for me to do as a teenager with my own legs trying to create that kind of power. And that certainly, I think, is the type of feeling that can lead to someone being a motorcycle owner. But I want you to focus on the question, J-Pass. It's so, if someone who doesn't like motorcycles buys a motorcycle, then they're a motorcyclist. And suddenly that opinion doesn't matter. It's a self-negating, it's such a hard question.
The snake is eating its tail. Where does it end?
Exactly.
And then as far as number 3,
to the last one, yes.
Should we ever do a podcast about the Suzuki Bergman or Maxi scooters? I don't think so, J-Pass. I don't think the audience wants it. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe there'll be a bunch of comments from Suzuki Bergman owners right now. And if you're not listening, if you're listening to this and you don't know what a Suzuki Bergman is, you're really not missing out. It's a 650cc scooter.
There's a whole line of Bergman. I believe there's the Bergman 200, Bergman 400 maybe, and then there's the Bergman 650, which is the flagship. And I've spent some time on a Bergman 650. All the Bergmans, I believe, I've ridden. I did a road trip on a Bergman 650 years ago, and I gotta say, it was pretty nice.
All right, well, we'll do a solo episode where you can sit and put the audience to sleep with your Bergman expertise.
Be nice. Scooters are motorcycles too, sort of. Anyway, what I would like to address.
I like scooters. I'm just saying, like, I just don't know
scooter people.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, I don't like you.
Dunbar, the bigot.
I just don't know if an entire episode on a Suzuki Bergman is probably the way to go.
No. What I would like to focus on here, J-Pass said, it is J-Pass's firm belief that if Honda made a modern electric maxi scooter that out-Bergmaned the Suzuki Bergman, in other words, a modern Honda electric scooter that was just better than any scooter out there would be a renaissance that would make the Super Cub look like their warm-up lap, which is a reference to the best-selling Honda of all time. And the last line really says it all, doesn't it? but I still wouldn't buy one. This is the problem, I think, with so many people's great ideas about what motorcycle is the next motorcycle to be the next great motorcycle. Is sort of like what they should do is build an XYZ, and then boy, oh boy, I tell you, they'd sell a million of those. I mean, I wouldn't buy one. I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to buy one. But boy, that's a gold medal idea there.
We've talked about this before in the podcast. The Simpsons got it right every time. And there was the episode of The Simpsons where Homer discovers his long lost cousin or whatever, who's like the head of the car manufacturer, and they design the car for the everyman. And Homer gives them all of the functions that he wants in an automobile.
Right.
And it bankrupts the company. So like The Simpsons knew what they were talking about, whether it's politics or automotive industry. Like they're always hitting close to home. I like it.
I'm not sure I like the insinuation that the Simpsons are better than High Side, Low Side, but whatever. All right, let's move on. JPass, thank you for your podcast ideas, your questions. They were thoughtful and interesting, and we had a lot of fun with it. Thank you very much for your email. Moving right along.
This is the final comment, I believe.
Comes in from, this is comment 13, right? Comes in from...
Oh, wait, did I miss one? Hold on. Wait, I missed one.
Dasha? Daxa?
Sorry.
Dasha.
My
Daxa.
bad.
I'm
not
sure
the last
exactly
one.
how you
Second
say
to
it.
last one.
Daksha writes in and says, for your perusal / frustration / discussion, I have enclosed in this email a very short clip of me using the common motorcycle-only toll-free lane found here in Malaysia, where I do the vast majority of my riding. This is where, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to watch this clip of Daxa riding their motorcycle around a toll booth in an open lane that is designed for two-wheel vehicles only. Daxa goes on to say, observe how cheap it seems to implement. Marvel at how effective. Perhaps even ponder how reasonable. Eat your hearts out, citizens of the, quote, land of the free. Just a fabulous email all around. And a very very interesting clip. And this is really, it's like teeing us up for a real hot button issue here on High Side, Low Side, which is that two-wheel vehicles shouldn't have to pay tolls.
Yeah. And
this is an example from Malaysia, which we experienced in India also, Spurge.
Yeah, we were watching this clip.
I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean,
this clip.
Zach and I got a chance to do this. It's very similar to what we were able to do cruising across India, and it was great then. It's great watching this clip from Malaysia. I feel as somebody that now commutes to RevZilla headquarters east on a toll road, I would love it if I could use my motorcycle to avoid paying the tolls. That would really make it a more affordable experience. I mean, I think on average...
Why are you paying tolls, Spurgeon? Why should you have to pay a toll?
I shouldn't.
On your motorcycle. You're not tearing up the roads.
I'm not.
You're going down the road on a 400 and something pound motorcycle. I mean, you're whatever. Just say you're 600 pounds of total weight going down the road. You're not ruining the road.
Yeah.
You're emitting
I pay the
fewer
exact same
particles.
tolls riding down the road in my Toyota Tacoma, which weighs, I don't know, 10 times what my motorcycle weighs, and I'm paying the exact same amount of money.
It's absurd. And you really just poured the exact right amount of salt on the exact wound that we have been nursing here, Daxa. Thank you for this. It is a I don't even know. We saved this question because we like the clip and we like the email and the phrasing and the grammar. But I don't have anything else to say except you're absolutely right. If somewhere in the world, elsewhere in the world, they agree that a motorcycle should be able to just go around a toll booth and you should be rewarded for your two-wheel transportation in some way, or at least not penalized for it, then why can't we do that here?
This is the kind of stuff that I don't understand why the AMA isn't advocating for. Like, these are little wins that would make motorcycling so much more incentivized. Yeah, enjoyable for people that are already doing, but also it would incentivize people to actually get into motorcycling because there's a benefit to it.
You know what my dad said? My dad is taking a grassroots approach to this topic. He says that when he pays a toll on a motorcycle, he makes a point to pull up to the toll booth and then take both his gloves off and then unzip his jacket and then dig his wallet out of his pants and then pull his wallet out and then pay in cash and then get the receipt and then put his wallet away and then zip his jacket up and then put both gloves back on, because he wants the person behind him to be thinking, what the F is this motorcycle? Like, just pay and go through. Like, why is it taking so long? Because it's a pain in the tail to pay a toll with, or it was a pain in the tail to pay a toll with cash. And as you said earlier, Spurgeon, toll tag placement on a motorcycle can be tricky. It's just, it all points to one direction.
Yeah.
And it's Malaysia.
Make it free for us. I will say, I have a confession, and I think this is probably the appropriate time to bring it up, to share it with our audience and to share it with you, Zach.
Tell me.
In regards to going around tolls, we talked about this earlier in the season, where I learned that you're a lawless citizen when it comes to paying tolls in garages for parking. You like to go.
Hang on. Tolls on a toll road are different than parking fees in a parking garage. It's the same principle, but it's very different.
Same principle, very different. But in a previous episode, we've talked about going around the little parking arm to park in a parking garage without taking the ticket, without paying. And you've admitted that this is something that you'd like to.
I have done in the
you
past.
Like to partake in.
I might do in the future.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's how you get your sick little adrenaline rush. In middle age, is just sticking it to the man.
Yes.
So when I was recently leaving the hotel for the BMW F900 GS launch, they said, "Oh, your bike is outside. Just go get it, and you can take off." And I went and I got the bike, and I came down to the toll, and the little arm was down, and there was no way that BMW didn't give me a ticket. I would have been happy to pay, but then there was also no way to go around the arm. So I ended up went back up, and then went out the indoor and rode down on the little sidewalk and went around it. And I immediately thought of you, because I was like, here I am. I'm doing what I said I never did. And I just want to admit to the high side, low side audience and to yourself that in the past 30 days, I have evaded the little toll arm for the parking garage at a luxury hotel in Las Vegas.
Welcome.
And now they know. Now they're going to come and get me. Now they know.
Welcome, my son, to the dark side. Let the hate flow through you. Okay, moving on.
But there's no way to get past the toll things, because the toll things all have the cameras now. They'll get you. They'll come after you. So,
okay, moving on to comment number 14. Spurgeon, I think this is yours.
This is the final comment of the comments episode before we get into the T-shirt giveaway. Comment 14 comes in from Mikhail, writes in and says, your recent episode on motorcycles that changed history, season 7, episode 10, inspired me to get in touch. I've noticed that Spurge talks about the Ducati Monster being the first production naked motorcycle. Even though there is no dispute that the Monster is a very successful and popular motorcycle, there were naked bikes in production that preceded the Monster. For example, Yamaha SRX released in 1985, and the Honda Bros, which I believe was the Honda Hawk GT here in the United States, released in 1988. Mikhail goes on to then quote sources from Wikipedia,
which we don't need to get into. Really.
Well, what I'll say is, Mikhail, as a history major, we weren't allowed to use Wikipedia as a source, so I'm going to need you to send in some alternate factual sources before I consider this question whatsoever.
And don't forget to pay for the parking garage. You kids, stay off my lawn.
What do you think, Mikhail? What do you think here, Zach?
Okay, so this is a fair point. That we might make a casual reference or three over the course of a high side, low side season where we say like, the first naked bike, the Triumph Speed Triple, or, the first naked bike, the first, the Ducati Monster, the first Ducati Monster, whatever we're talking about. Or like the first Goldwing was the first touring bike, blah, 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 blah. And then someone would say, well, no, technically in 1956, Harley Davidson released the FLH, whatever. The point is, please don't at any point take something that we say as like complete gospel or fact. We are two fallible human beings here, pulling from our memories for the most part with high side, low side. We never mean to I don't know,
upset you,
overhype our own knowledge. But I'll say this in our defense: when we are talking about the Ducati Monster as the first naked bike, I think we're talking about the beginning of that revolution, really, because if you want to get really kind of pedantic about it, and you're in luck, Mikhail, I do. When do you stop? When do you draw the line? Because I remember the Yamaha SRX. That's a good point. It's a big single cylinder. It was like a 600cc single, kind of sleek looking naked bike from the 80s there. My dad had one, actually. Raced it at Willow Springs. You probably knew that, Mikhail. Anyway.
Is that on Wikipedia, Mikhail?
Okay, all right. Easy does it there, history teacher. The point is, you can keep going back to those UJMs, right? Like, is a Honda CB1100 not a naked bike? Is it a Suzuki GS? What about a Honda CB550? That's a naked bike, right? Naked. What about a Harley Sportster, 1950 whatever? That's a naked bike. You got a BMW R60/2. That's a naked bike. You got your Triumph Bonneville.
Okay,
naked bike.
Okay, you've made your point. So the question is the Honda Hawk GT a UJM? Or is it a modern day naked sport bike? Because the point that we were trying to make is that Ducati with the Monster ushered in an era of modern naked sport bikes. Listen, man, the Honda Hawk was putting out like 45 rear wheel horsepower. Like, it wasn't like it was burning scorched earth. And I'm not saying that it wasn't a fun bike and it's become a cult classic. It was also around for 3 years. It didn't catch on in North America, whereas the Ducati Monster went on to define a class of motorcycles. It became one of the best-selling motorcycles for Ducati of all time, and it's still around today. So I understand the point that you're trying to make, Mikhail, and I appreciate you challenging us, and I can see your point of view, but like, was it the last of the UJMs, or was it the first of the naked sport bikes?
Wow. So, to capitulate a little bit to Mikhail, after teasing them to some end here, Spurgeon makes a great point, which is the staying power of both the Ducati Monster and the Triumph Speed Triple, as an example. If there were still a Hawk GT in Honda's lineup, if they were still making Hawk GTs, if it was still, there had been dozens and dozens of iterations over decades and decades, we might talk about that bike as the this bike that started it all. Because certainly that bike had an influence, and in some ways it is sort of a little Ducati Monster. It's a little V-twin, single-sided swing arm. And I do think that you are right to point out, to pick apart my own argument, you're absolutely right to call out motorcycles that came around after the birth of the sport bike, which is, in general, I think people often agree that it was the first GSX-R in the mid-1980s. Maybe that's something else that you'll try to pick apart, Mikhail. I'm just giving you fuel for your fire here. The point is, any naked motorcycle that came around after sport bikes became a thing certainly deserves some sort of tip of the cap as a machine that started that sort of revolution. But ultimately, as you can tell, Spurgeon and I are digging our heels in here. We're happy to stand by what we first said, even though you make some good points.
I have nothing left to say. I think
okay.
No,
well,
I appreciate you challenging us. I appreciate the fact that I can see your point of view on this, and maybe there's a bunch of other people out there that are in agreement with you. Anybody that's apparently making up Wikipedia as they go along. What I would say is, here's what I hope. I hope that anyone listening to this that didn't know what a Honda Hawk GT or Yamaha SRX was before you made your point, maybe they learned about a new motorcycle. Maybe they're looking for a used bike for their first bike, and they find a neighbor that's selling a Honda Hawk for $2,500, and they're like, "Oh, I heard about that on High Side Low Side. That's a cool bike, little kind of a cult classic going on." And it is. It's a great little motorcycle. And so for that, I thank you, Mikhail, because maybe you helped us introduce that motorcycle to a new, younger audience.
Right. And that's essentially what I was going to say. Thank you for your email, because if we genuinely disliked your email, we would have, buried it and deleted it and not read it on the air. But we enjoyed that you called us out on that, and that you brought up those motorcycles, and that you challenged Spurgeon Dunbar, the history teacher.
True.
So
bring it on, people. Challenge us. Shoot us comments to where, Zach? That's right.
High side, low side at RevZilla.com. Please do keep sending in your emails, your questions, your comments. We like to do once per season, as you may have noticed, a whole episode dedicated to your questions and comments. So please keep them coming. We love hearing from you all, and thank you for yet another, we hope, successful Q&A episode.
And as long as we're asking you to do things, we always. Oh wait. Oh, I thought we were going to do the T-shirt winner first, but I was wrong. My sheets of paper were wrong, Zach. I'm sorry.
Where's the rat? Where's the intern that did that? You were going to get beat with a hose wherever you are. Oh,
it's so simple, and it was just so wrong in the order of the pages.
So the next thing we're going to do, as Spurgeon's brain tries to keep up, is the Rev Trivia portion of our podcast, where we listen to an engine sound and try to guess it. There is no guest this time, of course. It's just the inmates running the asylum. So Spurgeon and I, without further ado, we're going to pull up this engine sound. We're all going to play together. So all I can say is
start your
shout
engines.
it out if you know it.
Ooh,
yeah. Well, okay. This is a tricky one. I feel tricky. I feel tricked.
So what I would say is, in honor of the fact that this is the comments episode, one of the comments that we did get in that we did not answer was from Maura, who wrote in an email saying, it would be really cool if you made an episode to explain how you guys recognize the engine sound. Personally, I'd really be interested in that. Who wouldn't want an entire episode on that? I don't know if I think that Zach and I can talk for 2 hours about how we have learned to identify these. But Zach,
also
walk us through maybe. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, spoiler alert, I don't know what this engine is. So I'm not sure what I'd tell you in that podcast about how I identify engine sounds if I can't identify this one.
I think we try to start with how many cylinders, right? Because sometimes you can tell from that. How many cylinders do you think you're hearing here?
It is one or two. I think it's two. I think it might be two. Okay. But and to answer your question, Maura, the way that I do that is that engines have an approximate bandwidth in which they operate, right? Like most engines run between 1,000 and 15,000 RPM, right? And so those revolutions per minute will be joined. You'll be hearing one piston firing, or you'll be hearing four pistons firing at an approximate 2,000 to 6,000 RPM, however much you hear the bike rev. And so when those pistons go off more often in a four-cylinder engine, because there are more pistons, there are more cylinders, then it creates a different noise, right? It creates a slightly higher pitched noise. And when there's fewer cylinders, it's more of a thump. And so, and every engine in between, is some combination of those things. So that's, to answer your question, Spurge, right? That's how we initially try to figure out how many cylinders it has.
And
but
then
in
from
this
there,
case, it's pretty hard.
From there, and because sometimes a parallel twin can be in a 360 firing order, which sometimes doesn't sound quite like a parallel twin. Right. And then from there, typically four cylinders will rev higher than twins, so you can tell how screaming the engine is versus how not screaming the engine is. But let's play the clip one more time before we give a hint.
Yes. I appreciate all the wind noise.
All right, I'm going to go out on the limb and say it's a parallel twin, or it's a twin, and I have a sneaking suspicion it's a parallel twin. That's my guess.
Okay. Well, what kind of parallel twin? Like what? How big? Like, is it small? Is it big?
Doesn't sound big.
No, it sounds small.
It sounds middle weighty.
The thing that's getting me is the flywheel weight. It's really, you hear it rev up and it carries, it revs like a bike with a light sort of flywheel mass will rev quickly, right? It'll go vroom, vroom, vroom. A bike with a heavy flywheel mass will rev slowly. It'll go vroom, boom, and like the engine revs will come down slowly when the throttle is closed. That is typically a characteristic of an old motorcycle or older motorcycle. Not necessarily, but this sounds like kind of like heavy flywheel and a small engine to me. It sounds
You think it sounds like a heavy flywheel?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
The way that like
What's
revs
throwing me
up
off?
and comes.
The wind noise is throwing me off.
Yeah.
But
okay, well, we got to make a guess before we get a hint. It would be just like Chase, wouldn't it, for it to be a Hawk GT? Oh, I just want to say
son
that
of
it
a
would be
bitch.
just like
I wouldn't
producer
put it
Chase.
past him. That is a V twin.
It is, I think
what
90
people are-
degree, right? 90 degree V twin.
I don't think it's
Anyway,
90, is it? Yeah,
I don't know. It doesn't
I
matter.
don't think it is.
I'm gonna go with a very small single cylinder engine. I'm gonna go with a Honda Cub or a Honda Trail 110. I'm going Honda Trail 110.
No, I just don't think so. I feel like it's a parallel twin, and I don't have a guess. I don't have a guess as to what.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. It does sound like a twin.
I just think it's a parallel twin. Anyway, all right, let's just do a hint. We're gonna.
It wouldn't be a Trail 110 because that would be kickstart.
No,
It wouldn't.
no,
have
I
an
know, and
electric
I
start.
was
Well,
gonna
make a
let- I was
guess.
gonna
What
let you-
parallel twin? How big's the engine? Is it a 300? Is it a 1200? What is it?
It's a midsize. It's similar to my Bonneville. It's an 865-ish something or other. Feels like maybe even like a 360 crank. That's kind of where my head's at. But I don't think Chase. I don't think Chase was smart enough to go and get my dad to record this for him. So I don't think he's using my own bike against me. But I don't know.
I just don't. I could be a little 270 crank parallel twin.
It could be a
I wouldn't
270
be surprised.
crank. Yeah.
Okay. What's the hint? We need a hint. Give us the hint, Spurge.
V twin.
It's a V twin. Okay. So
Could be a
we're-
Honda Hawk. Could be a Honda. Like producer
could be a
Chase
Honda
could have
Hawk.
thrown a Honda Hawk at us. I mean, small displacement.
Yep.
I want to say
Okay.
it's like a 60 something degree. I don't feel like it was a 90 degree, but I could be wrong on that.
Electric start V twin with a real heavy flywheel. Oh boy.
Doesn't sound Harley-esque to me.
No. I agree. Although it could be like one of those Harleys that no one at Harley wants to admit, like a.
You mean the 750 or the 500?
Yeah, like a Street 500 or a Street 750 or.
Yeah.
Or.
Where would Chase get one of those? Where would he get one of those?
From
who would have
beloved
written in?
Viewer, commenter. It's just the idle's high. Also, the idle's like pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter. It just seems like a small display. I'm going Hawk GT.
Maura, you think this would make a great 2-hour episode to just hear Zach go pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, and me go, I don't know. Chase is using this against me. All right, Hawk GT is Zach's guess. I think that is apropos, knowing exactly what Chase would do to us. Hint number 2, this model ran from 1988 to 1992.
Ooh.
Hawk GT, while it was ousted from America in 91, did run beyond that in foreign markets, and maybe they did sell it in 92. Maybe Wikipedia was wrong, and they didn't get it out of America in 91.
Okay.
I don't know. What do you think? Honda Hawk GT?
That's
final answer.
I'm trying to like a little V twin from that era.
Or maybe it was the Yamaha? No, because the Yamaha was a single. Yeah.
I could go Honda VTR 250. There was a little 250 V twin. And my dad had one, and he liked it. That's all I was to say.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else from.
Okay. That's my guess. I'm changing my guess at the last minute, even though it would be just like Chase for a Hawk GT in there.
Yeah, I just don't trust Chase. I think I'm gonna stick with a Honda Hawk GT.
Do it. Let's see what we got.
Well, we're both wrong. Actually, we're in the middle. This is a 1988 Honda Bros 400, which is a Hawk GT, but it's the smaller displacement 400 version. When we were talking earlier, we were talking about the Honda Hawk 650. They did have a smaller. Right? I don't know if the 400 was brought to the States for what it's worth.
I'm not sure. I remember a couple people raced him at my club.
I swear to God, producer Chase used the quote here from Wikipedia just to rub salt in my wound. He says the Hawk GT was one of the first modern naked bikes to hit the market, and many argue it was the inspiration to the much more successful Ducati Monster with the source code for Wikipedia. It seems like Mikhail actually sent in this clip, so maybe that's why Mikhail was so defensive about the Honda Bros 400 being the first naked sport bike, because it sounds like they are an owner of a Honda Bros 400 from 1988.
Well, I've got bad news for you. It sounds very similar to a Honda Trail 110. So,
Do with that what you may.
I just wouldn't have, even that bike, I wouldn't have expected the revs to be, revs so slow. Revs so slow. My goodness. Okay. Well, that was fun. We thoroughly embarrassed ourselves, but I am very proud of myself for calling it out before we even got a hint that I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a Honda Hawk, but instead it was a bike we never got in America, as far as we know.
I mean, it is a Honda Hawk. It's just a small displacement version of it. So there you go. Producer Chase. Wiley
gets us again.
As you might think he is. All right, let's move on to the t-shirt winner for today. So we've talked about how we would want you to send in an email to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com with all of your comments, your questions, your concerns. Yes. We also would love it if you could please head over to Apple Podcasts to leave us a review. Give us 5 stars. We're trying so hard here, people. Just give us an A for effort. It just helps. It helps other people find the podcast, and it helps us get our message out there to other motorcyclists. And the winner today, for someone that left us a lovely review, Household 6177 writes in and says, "Thank you all for such a great show. Fun, intelligent, mostly, ... plus informative. Laugh out loud. In all seriousness, when I max out my own quiet helmet therapy time, it's nice to listen to all of you. Now a plug to all of those out there like me who suffer from PTSD. I find that being alone on long motorcycle rides is a great way to listen and to work through my demons. Sometimes it's just the time that I need to reset, and others it's private time to have, a solid let it all out cry fest. But after a long trip, especially one that includes camping and wilderness, I'm ready to return home to be the person that I need to be for my family. For me, helmet time equals better mental health."
Great message there.
I love it.
Great message. I was going to say great email, but it's not an email. It's a review, which we very much appreciate. The pat on the back for the podcast, but mostly we would like to thank you, Household 6177, for being vulnerable and open about how you use both high side, low side, and your time on a motorcycle. And I'm choosing not to think that you turn on high side, low side in your helmet and then start crying, which if you interpret this right, you could suggest is happening. But jokes aside, this is a great call out for anyone who might suffer from PTSD for whatever reason, that maybe time on a motorcycle can help you. And if it does help you, you are not alone. And for that, we would like to send you a free t-shirt, Household 6177. So please send your mailing address and your preferred t-shirt size to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com.
Yeah, I think this is it's a super meaningful message to get. And I think, as Zach and I were going through it, we wanted to pick it because we really liked the humor aspect of it. But more importantly, I think it's really everybody's job in a public forum from time to time to take a break and say, there's a lot of people suffering with varying degrees of mental health, and kind of normalizing that and allowing people to talk about it in an open forum. I think this is our little way of doing that. And I that's our gift to the audience out there. And just, there's people out there like yourself. You're not alone. And hopefully this allows you to reach out and to look for different ways to heal. And I think that I like the fact that this person puts in there, it's what they do to be the person that they need to be for their family the rest of the time. And we commend that.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, thank you again for your review and for that sort of advice and PSA. We appreciate it. We appreciate your listenership and viewership, and however you are taking in high side, low side. With that, Spurgeon Dunbar, Just a friendly reminder.
Did you say to send us an address? We need you to send your address and shirt size. You said that? Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. T-shirt size.
All right.
Mailing address. HSLS@RevZilla.com. While we're on the topic of our email address, please do keep sending us your engine sounds. Reminder that should be about 30 seconds of the bike starting up, running, revving a few times, and shutting off. You can leave a comment below if you're watching this on YouTube. We do appreciate that. And keep the emails coming with your questions and your comments because we enjoy them very much. And we're almost done here, right, Spurge?
So, Zach, we've almost come to the end of a season.
Indeed.
We are going to be coming back with the next episode with the season finale for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Of all the things that you perhaps learned today, what was your one takeaway as we look back on all the comments from people that wrote in throughout the season?
What's the big takeaway here? Well, I gotta say, Spurge, I didn't know that for all those times that we rode together with communicators, you never wanted to be talking to me. You didn't like me.
That's not what I said.
You didn't want to be talking to me.
I enjoyed our conversations. We had great talks. I never said that. I think in group rides, in big group rides, it becomes a little bit cumbersome at times.
Okay,
you and me, or you and me and one other person. Like, I had a great time talking to you in India.
Oh, that's right. We were on comms in India. Yeah, that's true. I was going to say, have
we
taken any
16 hours at a time on average? I had your voice in my head, just going at it.
Right. No whistling. That's no whistling, no humming. That's common Bluetooth headset etiquette. No whistling, no humming.
Honestly, in that
people don't need
we
to hear
rode
that.
for what, like 12 or 13 days straight, and there was only one day where I think I was like, I'm going to put some music on and cut you out for a minute. Yeah. But like other than that, we were talking to each other. I mean, we should have recorded that for the podcast. It was just
oh yeah, that's what people want. Yeah, 12-day podcast of us talking. Anyway, take us out, Spurge. What was your big takeaway from this episode? What do you got?
Comment number 12 from J Pass.
J Pass.
While J Pass was throwing out the ideas there, you did a little trick with your eyes. And now I finally realize why you are so fast on a motorcycle. Because as I learned at California Superbike School, riding a motorcycle fast is all about how you use your eyeballs. And you apparently have better eye control than anyone else I've ever seen. That's why you're so fast. And I've been wondering, was it the way you were raised? Was it, your dad taking you to a racetrack at a young age? It's not. Right. It's biological. Your eyes are just stronger than the average person's.
Well, I don't know who said that because I can't see anything, but thank you, whoever you are, for that compliment. No, I don't have particularly
I
strong
said
eyes.
that. I'm watching. You were doing the little eye trick thing while J Pass was written. And now I know. Now I know why.
Well, maybe that's what it is. My vision is not especially strong. I actually seriously need to go to an eye doctor and see if I need contact lenses or something. And on that,
that's because everybody. And the reason that I know that you're over 40 is I remember going to the eye doctor for the first time. And the doctor was like, "How old are you?" I was like, "I just turned 40." He's like, "Welcome, welcome."
Yeah. Anyway, on that very serious note about how Zach needs to go to an eye doctor, we will let you all go. Thank you so much for hanging out for this episode of High Side, Low Side. Thank you all for your comments, your emails. Keep them coming, and we will see you next time, everybody.